Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I talk about four different types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. And in that light, I'm always interviewing business owners, entrepreneurs on the cutting edge, impacting the world and doing good. So today we have Dan Peterson, and his goal is to use 25 years of business management and ownership to add value for listeners on topics ranging from business, entrepreneurship, marketing. So he is the founder and CEO of Flip Switch Social Media, and it's going to be a great conversation about pursuing your passions, entrepreneur, family, parenting. And with that, I'll welcome Dan to the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate having me on.
Yeah, I know we had connected through Podmatch, and tell us more about you, how you got started, your business, and we'll delve into it.
Sure. So it's a long story, but I'll make it really short. So I'm 43 years old. I grew up in a small town, central Illinois, and in that town, my family, when I say family, I mean my parents, grandparents, aunt and uncle, they ran a Ben Franklin store, which is, if for those of you listeners that might not know what that is, it's a precursor to Walmart, basically. So retail store, it's got everything and everything. And I grew up in that until I was basically in high school. Then I managed different businesses for the next decade or so, quit doing that, formed a rock band, did that for 5 years, and then ended up moving to Chicago, up where I'm at right now, for the band. But the band didn't work out, and I had to get a real job. So I started going door to door, and I found that I was really, really good at it, like top 1% in the country. So I found my niche there, and then ended up owning three different sales offices from Chicago, Central Illinois, and Houston, Texas, and managed 1,000 different sales reps in those offices combined, trained and managed over time. So yeah, I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different industries, but I can speak to a lot of things.
That's why you're perfect for this podcast. You're full of stories, and and what's really interesting is you found your niche in door-to-door selling, which is a very interesting skill.
It's a very interesting skill, something I never dreamed I would have been doing. And I should add that I only did that for a few years, and then I ended up starting Flip Switch back in 2012. So Flip Switch is over a decade old now. But yeah, the door-to-door thing was really crazy. It was something that I never thought I would do, and I just fell in love with it right away. I mean, it took like one training, and I was like, "This is really fun." And some people hate it, of course, because you get told no a million times a week. But I loved it. I loved losing. I loved the fact that somebody could tell me no at their door, and I had a chance to go win at the next door, and I could do that for an infinite amount of doors. So the game was never, the game never stopped. So it was really cool. I enjoyed it.
You have this idea where most people think losing is bad, but you have this idea, this counterintuitive idea that losing is awesome, and elaborate on that.
Well, I think it's just a mindset, and I didn't always have that. Trust me, I developed that with age, I guess you could say, but and experience in different businesses. But I think that there's just two sides to the coin. There's two ways you can look at it, and you can either decide, and I'll relate this to the door to door because it's a really good analogy. There's a lot of people that I worked with over the years that couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle the rejection. And I mean, that people would start, you talk about a high turnover rate. I mean, people would start and stop, get hired and quit the same day many, many times. And it was because they couldn't handle that rejection. And I never took it personally. I just looked at it as a challenge, and every door was a different game. Every door was a different challenge. And I think that's what I liked about it so much. So yeah, it's just two sides of the same coin, but some people can't handle that negative side of it. And I guess I didn't have a problem with that, but there's so many lessons in that. I always wanted to write a memoir called like Memoir of a Door-to-Door Salesman or something, and just relate it all to life, because you learn so much in that job. I recommend everybody drop what they're doing right now and go door to door. Just do it for a year, nothing else.
Yeah, and it's interesting because your passion comes out, and it's very evident. And for a lot of the listeners, they have this stable, they follow the traditional path. But how does someone really find their passion?
You know, trying a lot of things is really how it works. I've been told many times, like, how many, my wife would even ask me, like, how many jobs have you had? She was still finding out well after we were married, different jobs that I had. And I mean, I managed two different lumber yards. I ran two different pizza places. I worked with people with disabilities. And that's actually where I met my wife. I've delivered sandwiches. I mean, I've done every kind of job you can think of. Even helped my grandpa back in the day, who was a bricklayer. I mean, with hard labor, mixing mortar and laying bricks. And I mean, you can name a job in any industry, and I've probably done something close to it. So just trying a lot of things and finding what you enjoy and then finding a way to monetize it is the key.
Yeah.
And, living within your means too. If you, so many people just have to keep up with the Joneses, and that's a very difficult game to play because you never have enough. When you're never satisfied, you never feel satisfied. And so it's just it's all mental, and it's just something that I think I've developed over time. And now I'm trying to help like younger entrepreneurs. Like, it's a popular thing now to try to found a business or like a new app or a new website company and all these things that are out there. And having run a digital agency now for over a decade, I've been able to see that side of it, the more B2B side, and seeing that there's a lot of people out there trying to do a lot of different things. So now I'm trying to help them a little bit and not make some of the mistakes that I made along the way.
Yeah. It's interesting how you mentioned our consumerist culture and sort of this rat race and keeping up with the Jones. And one thing is with this idea about success, and you talk about forgetting about money. It's not, how much we can hoard and how much, what mansions and all of this. Tell us your viewpoints on money and success, and because I know there's a lot of misconceptions.
Well, I think it's really evident in society. You kind of touched on it a second ago. So many people are just miserable, and you really see it when you're in my industry and social media, which is obviously like everything now, and you're constantly online looking at comments and questions and all of that, and you're looking at it from a macro perspective, and it's like, oh my gosh, people are just miserable, and they're all trying to chase something, whatever that may be, whether it's money or now with social media, people are trying to chase fame. They're really thinking like, oh, I can go be the next YouTube star, and they can, and people do it every day. But I think that a lot of people just don't have they don't have it in the right framed perspective to be able to, I guess the better way to put it, they don't have the self-awareness to say like, hey, I'm really not cut out for this. So they push themselves to do something like maybe it is be a YouTube star or an Instagram influencer or whatever, and they're not good at it, but they try it, and then it hurts them mentally, and then they try a different thing and it doesn't work. Like instead of just settling in, finding their passion or finding something that entertains them and then doing that, it's just, again, it's a different way to look at things. So yeah, I think America especially, but the world in general has a big issue with how they define success. And here's the other thing too, Chris, it's the way people look at everybody else at scale now, because now you've got the internet and you can see everybody else, what they're doing. So you're held against a standard that you impose upon yourself for everybody else. You're looking at 500 friends on Facebook. Well, what are they doing? And it's all a highlight reel, right? They're all just taking pictures of themselves on vacation and the happy family moments. They're not looking at the fight they had with their wife that morning. They're not they're not posting about the car that just broke down right after the furnace went out and so on. So it's a problem that people have, and the internet has exacerbated it to a certain degree because now people can see it all. But at the same time, now, I'm trying to kind of impart the same wisdom and say like, look, there's a different way to look at it, and you don't have to look at everything through the Joneses, chasing the Joneses lens.
Yeah, and it's you bring up a very good point, because you run a social media company, and especially in today's, you mentioned the internet has allowed social at scale, and we live in a digital world. And children, how do you help especially children, mental health and eating disorders, bullying, all of this? How do you cut through the noise and help them find their way?
Yeah, it's really tough. I think it starts with a strong family. I think the more that you can build confidence in your kids and have them feel like they're important and they're, I don't know, heard or whatever word you want to use, but having that self-confidence at a home level is where it starts, I think. And then just putting good things into them, not letting them, it sounds so old fashioned, but not letting them get in with the wrong crowd. I mean, that's something that you can look at in real life, like person to person, but also digitally. There's groups on Facebook, there's groups on all these platforms, Snapchat, Instagram, everything else. And if they're following negativity and they're looking at things through that lens, like I just mentioned, where they feel like they're never catching up to their friends and their friends are always doing something better or more fun. When you look at it through that lens, it becomes really dangerous because that's what's hard on the mental health. I think kids to a certain degree can get over some of the bullying and some of the things. And I'm not putting that down at all. I'm not discounting the fact that that's a big deal. But I think that we underestimate some of the level of how kids are capable of overcoming that stuff. I think instead of necessarily focusing on how we get rid of the problem, it's more building up the solution side of it so that they have the tools in their arsenal to be able to combat that when it does make sense.
Yeah, it's especially when with when Web3 and the metaverse and basically we basically go into any virtual world that children mental health is going to be very important. And as a parent and as an entrepreneur, in the social media landscape, how do you see parents handling the good and bad of social media in this day and age?
I think it's a fine line between allowing your kids to be on platforms at a certain age and not, as well as making sure that you have some oversight into that if they are on those platforms. I think too many parents in this day and age turn their kids loose on social media at a really young age. And I'm talking like 8, 9, 10-year-olds on Snapchat, that kind of thing. And they don't check in. They don't see what's going on. They don't try to follow up. They don't look through their kids' texts or at least ask their kid about, hey, how's things going? It's very much a digital babysitter in a lot of regards for a lot of people. And I think that that's very dangerous. And it's not, I'm not anti-social media because I run a social media agency, but for example, I have at the time that you and I are talking right now, I have a 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and 4-year-old, all daughters. And the 13, 11-year-old, neither one of them are on social media. The 13-year-old's probably getting close. I'm probably to that point, but she'll be going into high school this year. And that's about kind of when I set a mental, kind of hurdle and said, okay, at this time we'll allow it or something. But we even held off getting her a phone that could handle all of that. We got her a phone that was like basic and you can call and text, but now she's got an iPhone and all that stuff. But we were behind compared to every parent that I pretty much know. And that's partially because I know what's out there because I live in it. I live in this industry and I know that it's dangerous, but at the same time, I'm not trying to be overprotective either. I'm just trying to maintain a little bit of their old school childhood that I had growing up in the 1980s where, everybody rode their bikes around and did all that. And I'm not naive enough to think that that's how it is anymore. I understand, but there's a little bit of, I don't know, whatever I'm trying to say, like a little passion for the past there that I'm trying to hang on to, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's tough. And I don't try to tell parents what to do. I give suggestions and stuff. Every family's different. Some kids are much more mentally astute and able to handle things like this. And others, I think, are way behind in the EQ game and not able to handle it. So it's on a case by case basis.
Yeah, this is wonderful advice, and I get a lot of reach out now, especially the Gen Z cohort, and they're saying, especially with college, what's interesting is a lot of exit the U.S. News rankings. It's very expensive. There's questions of bias. So how would you what do you tell your kids? How important is getting a college degree? Because kind of Gen Z's sort of questioning. Do I need to do I need to go to college? I can, start a company. And what are your thoughts?
I am on the unpopular side of this opinion, and I don't think that in most cases college is necessary. Not in this day and age with technology the way it is, and the ability to to learn a lot of things and do a lot of things without a quote unquote formal education. That being said, obviously there's still a place for it. I mean, I would not, you're a doctor. I definitely don't want you learning how to be a doctor off of YouTube and treating me. So I am fully aware that there are situations, accountants, engineers, architects, all these things, obviously these skilled positions that need education. And it has a certain element of weeding out, right? I mean, it does weed out a certain level of lazier, less motivated student that you don't want to be your doctor as well. But on that note, I think that there's, we're still hanging on to the past in this country, especially, and globally, honestly, where there's that old adage that, you graduate high school, you go to college, you get a job, you work 30, 40 years and die. And that's kind of it. And I think now with the fact that we have the internet and this, powerful phone in my hand right here, that we can see and do so many more things now. And we understand what's available to us as a culture and as humans. And I just don't feel that I feel that people are catching on to it, and the jig is up. And it's also very expensive babysitting scenario. Again, like, you got my kids, I told them, to answer your question, like, you better know what you want to do. If you're going to go to college, you need to really go because you either know what you want to do or have a very good idea. But if you don't, go travel, go do something for a couple of years, go live life and learn. I looking back, I can't imagine now thinking when I was 18 or 19 that I had a clue of what life was going to bring or what I was going to do or anything. And I get it. Like my one daughter, she's definitely probably going to be a teacher. She just really, really wants to do it. That might change in the next 4 or 5 years. Who knows? But she's really bent on being a teacher, and that's fine if that's what she wants to do. But if you don't know what you're going to do and you're just going to college to get a piece of paper because you think it's going to get you a better job, I mean, that ship has sailed a long time ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a big fan, to put it in 3 words or less.
I think you're right. It has its place, especially if you're going to do like a professional or you need to be like these skilled. But then, like I said, the internet and, especially blockchain technologies really opened up so many doors, and you don't really, if you're going to go that route, you don't really need it. There's value of doing other things. So
right. And hopefully it gets to a point where people don't need, I think there's a mindset where people will go to college to get what we always heard, a good job, right? You want to get a good job. Well, what is a good job? I mean, the trades, for example, are heavily needed right now. Plumbers, pipe fitters, that's something that I am a huge advocate for. Like, everybody should go to trade school right now. You'll make really good money and you'll have a good job and so on. But I say everyone, going back to my previous point, only if that's something that you're interested in doing. Just going and getting a job for the sake of getting a job is not, I think life's too short for that. Yeah. Simply put.
Yeah. And especially with COVID really shook up the whole world and made people wake up and like realize that you only have one life, YOLO, and really, nothing is guaranteed. So
that's exactly right. That's the best thing that came out of that couple of years of all that craziness was I think people had a lot of time to sit and think and realize that there's a lot more out there that's available to them besides what their grandparents and their parents have told them to do.
Really interesting conversation. I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people, especially the younger generation. One thing is, last question is, if you could do anything differently in the last 20 years, would you do the same thing, do differently, and any regrets?
No regrets. The only thing I would probably do differently from like an entrepreneurial business standpoint would be to move a little bit slower with my growth expectations. I think that I came out swinging, thinking like this thing is going to blow up and turn it, and just really take off. And having set my expectations a little bit differently back, a decade ago or so, I probably would have saved myself a little bit of mental stress because I expected to be a different place at a different time. And just looking at it through that type of scenario, but no regrets. I would give advice to younger entrepreneurs or people that are trying to do their own thing now, especially with the capabilities that are around now compared to even a decade ago. I mean, just look how much room we've got now a decade later from when social media really hit. And I would tell them to just go out and do more stuff. Just do it as much, like you're going to live a lot longer, so do it, and rely on medicine to save you in the end or whatever, you know what I mean? But like thinking that you have to get a job right out of college or high school, I mean, and all that is craziness. So I did go to college. I didn't graduate with a degree. I've got, I don't even know, 150 credit hours or something crazy, but I was actually a med student in the beginning. And then I wish I'd have stuck with that, but I didn't. I went into business and then ended up managing and owning a couple different places and never going back. Didn't need to, but, and which saved me a lot of money too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. No regrets. I don't look in the past too much.
And that's the best thing is that, I talk to a lot of, people in their 80s, and one thing is the best advice I ever got when I was in my 20s was don't die with regret, really, because you only have one life. You don't want to be at 80 and realize you wasted your life. So
100%.
And
that's exactly right.
So great. I love this conversation. How can people reach out to you? I know you're Flip Switch social media. How can they reach out, contact you, follow you?
Yeah, you can find my company everywhere. Flip Switch. Now I'm having trouble saying it too. Flip Switch social media, and then my personal side of things. If you want to just reach out and find me, it's Dan Peterson Official, because there's other Dan Peterson, so I had to do something different. So Dan Peterson Official. I usually have a pink, kind of looks like a 1980s vinyl record album looking logo, which is kind of my nod to both my past and my kids. Having 3 girls, I have the pink logo. So it's pretty easy to find if you look for it. But yeah, I'd be happy to speak to anybody that wants to talk about any of this stuff.
Awesome. Great conversation. Be sure to check out Dan. He's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And his website is Flip Switch Social Media. And with that, thanks so much for a great conversation.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it very much.